Are we ready? Should we start?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the panel on harnessing generative AI for inclusive global education. We're super happy to have you here with us. This is supposed to be a very informal event, so please feel free to interfere with questions. So I will tell you how the day will go and when can you start asking questions, and you can do it just dynamically. So what is the goal actually of this panel today? We wanted to know how can we prepare calibers and candidates who can work on AI who are globally competent. And why is that? Because currently the entire discussion is about having companies shifting everything digitally to using AI and how easy that is. You just get the software developer and then automatically they can do everything using generative AI. But actually, we don't think that this is the current situation, and we need to figure out how can we do this transitional period of preparing new candidates who know how to do this, preparing new candidates who know how to use AI in research, preparing new candidates who know how to generate AI research that is advanced, and how to upskill the current working force without losing their competitive edge. And for that, our key candidates to this are the people who will work as practitioners and the researchers side, whether they're making AI or using AI. So this is like the general theme. And of course, we're focusing a little bit more on generative AI because this is what made AI accessible for everyone. And it seems like everyone can do it at the moment. So I wanted to give you a bit of background. How did we pick our speakers? Because this speaks to the diversity and the importance of the topic. We had like two axes. We wanted to know more about, so all of them has expertise because they're university professors in teaching the different stages of prepping those calibers, but like we wanted to focus on specific things for each of them. We wanted to look at how can we prepare the undergraduates who are going to become practitioners. So you can see the slides, actually. Huh? Give me a second. You're not seeing my slides. Is Nico here to help out? Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry for the hiccup.
Sharing and
You start sharing again?
share. It's here, right?
Yes. Back again. Sorry for this hiccup. Okay, so we had two axes. We wanted to have a bit of diversity about the type of candidates we're targeting. The first part is whether they are undergraduates, industrial researchers, or researchers. And the second axis is in terms of geographical locations. We have candidates who have a lot of background in the locations that they have learned in and where they are coming from and where they are contributing. So we wanted to have, maybe I do a quick introduction for them. Anicia is the head of the National Research Center in Namibia. And this is like the equivalent of NSF. And she has a lot of expertise in the African context and building programs for AI. Salim is the president of the German International University, and this is back in Cairo in Egypt. And he has a lot of expertise in the context related to the MENA region. Yannis is a professor in Athens, and he's the president of the ACM, and he has a lot of expertise in the context of Greece in terms of teaching, and also globally because of the ACM role. And last but not least, Paul is a professor, he's a director in the German Center for Artificial Intelligence, and he has a lot of expertise in the context of Germany and in Europe as well. The day will flow as they're going to give you 5-minute pitches about the main ideas they think should contribute into preparing the caliber of the future. And then afterwards, we're going to start the discussion phase. And without further ado, we start by Salim. You can, and do you have the mic?
Okay, good morning. Do you hear me? Okay. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation. I will put you first in the context. As Passant said, I'm the president of the German International University. I'm not Egyptian. I'm German-Tunisian. Thus, I did my studies in Kaiserslautern. I did my PhD and my habilitation at the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich. And I would love actually to put you into the context, because whenever we talk about Egypt, most of the people really do not know exactly the landscape of education there. Egypt, as well as the MENA region, consists of really a young and dynamic population. And we see it in the number of students joining universities. Thus, I will take as an example Egypt. In Egypt, we don't have a lot of universities compared to Germany. In Germany, we are having roughly 400 universities serving 2.8 million students. In Egypt, we are having only 90 universities. And these 90 universities, they are serving 3.6 million students at a time. And that's why we are talking about mega huge universities, which are actually state universities in Egypt. And that's why whenever you go to Germany, you get really confused about the different types of universities there. Thus, we have only 27 state universities. And the last few years, the last 20 years, 27 new private universities have been established just to support, let's say, the education in Egypt. And unfortunately, and fortunately for us, because the German University in Cairo, as well as the German International University, both of them are private universities, these universities are now leading the education in terms of quality. And I will talk later about, let's say, the reason about it. Thus, back then, in 2003, when I moved from Germany to Egypt, I was one of the co-founders of the first German university in Cairo. It was also constructed in the desert. 20 years, after 20 years, the university went from 0 to 15,000 students. And we are talking about undergrad students and for sure additional postgrad students in this case. 5 years ago, a new administrative capital has been established, and there was a wish from the president of the state to establish a second university in the new administrative capital. And here we go. We establish a second university. It's the German International University. And just to give you an idea about the explosion of numbers of students, we went actually within 4 years from 0 to 4,000 students. And if we talk about computer science, we started the first batch with 40 students. And currently, every year, we are actually having 400 students that are joining the Faculty of Informatics and Computer Science. Thus, roughly speaking, there is a huge initiative from the private sector as well as the government in order to develop a kind of a national strategy for AI. There is something called Egypt 2030. It has been put in 2016. And one of the objectives is actually to go into something called Digital Egypt. And that's why the idea is that the government processes, all of them, they have to be automated using actually AI. And this needs a lot of support from, for sure, educational institutions in order, as Passant said before, in order actually to, let's say, develop the AI skills in the undergrad actually programs as well as in the postgrad programs. And that's why if we take a look at most of the universities that have been established lately, and again, we are talking about 27 new private universities, and in addition to that, 6 branch campuses, they have been established 3 years ago. These are actually branch campuses coming mainly from the UK and from Canada. And here, actually, the idea is just actually to offer the programs of the future. And that's why most of the universities, they are actually focusing on study programs in AI. Some of them are focusing in study programs in cybersecurity, in data science, but mainly actually most of the universities, they are actually offering a lot of courses in machine learning and programs actually in machine learning. But we can actually talk later about it. Thus, in a nutshell, there is a kind of a national strategy, and this was actually, let's say, put in the vision of Egypt 2023 in order actually to increase the development of AI into the GDP by $42.7 billion, okay, which corresponds to 7.7% from the overall GDP. That's actually the main idea is how can we support actually to have Egypt as one of the international hubs for AI, not only for Egypt, but for Africa as well as the MENA region. This is, in a nutshell, the introduction about, let's say, the contributions and the initiatives in Egypt and the MENA region.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Slim. And for a bit of context, I'm actually a graduate of the university, the German university in Cairo that he has been speaking about. And now next, we'd like to hear from Anicia about what's happening in Namibia with AI education.
Hi, everyone. So as she said, I'm Anicia Peters. I'm the CEO of the National Commission on Research, Science and Technology, and innovation is also in there. We're a research council, so we're responsible for the funding. And when Passant was actually, when I received the invitation, I was actually quite excited, not because of this panel, sorry, but I was excited to actually learn about the learnings and outcomes and so on, and you know, how do you chart the way forward? Because the NCRST is also responsible for setting up the National AI Institute, and then, of course, growing the capacity in AI. Now, I have a few more roles. So I was also the chair of the Presidential Task Force on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and there were several recommendations on AI for Namibia that's being actioned. And then I'm also an adjunct research professor at the University of Namibia, and I specialize in human-computer interaction. About a year ago, I was a vice president of research at the University of Namibia. Before that, I was a faculty dean for computing at a different university in Namibia. And finally, I'm also the founder of the Africa Human-Computer Interaction Conference Series, AFRICAI, which is now having a very strong focus on HCI AI and human-centered AI. So now, coming back to what I want to sort of touch on is that when OpenAI sort of had the Netscape moment in November 2022, and the ordinary public became aware of the power of Gen AI, the continent of Africa was not left untouched. So students were very excited. Teachers and lecturers and faculty were very confused because they were maybe not even confused, ignorant as to what had just happened. So I had several engagements initially sort of in that sphere with higher education, with schools, and so on. And this is the confusion that was reigning. So, and I think that the faculty and even school teachers are still left dumbfounded. They still don't know. I know that they reached out and said, hey, you know, how do we handle this, right? What is coming next? Initially, there was just some advice about, oh, okay, if we are going to just ask to cite, that ChatGPT be cited, then that would be sufficient. And later on, we discovered all of the hallucinations, and now it is like, please don't upload any content on unpublished research or reviews into ChatGPT. So the education has been sort of very slow. The universities have also been extremely slow to react. And I think this is also because of very lengthy sort of curriculum development processes. However, the universities did roll out the data science degrees, but mostly as postgraduate degrees. This is also prevalent across Africa, South Africa and other countries. But the degrees in AI is something that is still leaving a lot to be desired. There's 2 universities in South Africa, for instance, that's offering like a honors degree in AI. And then in Namibia, the AI curricula is also now actually being rolled out, not rolled out, but now being refined. One thing about the curricula, though, is that, looking at the contention that one has in curricula concerning how many core courses do you have to include, and then, of course, your sort of selective courses. And then you still have the institutional core courses, which is oftentimes a hindrance because a student can take only so many credits, right? And so what are we cutting out? We're cutting out, sometimes we're compromising a little bit on ethics. We're cutting out the human-centered sort of design, or human-centeredness or centricity. We're cutting out, for instance, the trustworthiness, the responsible, etc. So all of those type of modules are the ones that are actually being compromised. Now, others would argue, yes, but we can always integrate it in a different form. What is interesting, though, is that in Namibia, in 2 of the curricula that's coming in AI and also HCI, the notion of African values to be embedded into the curriculum is coming out strongly. Because everywhere where we go to across Africa, that is something that is coming out that we are lagging behind. Now, let me just wrap it up in what are some of there are multiple challenges, multiple opportunities. But some of the challenges is data, right? In Africa, we always know that we're complaining about it, but also computing infrastructure. We are seeing, the energy intensity now. Imagine regions where you already have that's already energy insecure, right? So you have a problem with that. And then you have also specialized skills. We're rolling out these AI curricula, but we don't oftentimes have all of the skills like on this side of the world, for instance. The other thing that we are concerned about is assessment methods, and that comes back to curricula, because now you have to sort of find different types of assessment methods, and then find another way of combating, for instance, the blatant plagiarism, I would call it, that Gen AI sort of makes it so easy to deal with, and of course, there are different types that we are building into such curricula. But the other one is that people like me oftentimes say that there's another stream, and that is that we have to rapidly upskill and reskill, and we can't always focus on just university degrees. But then again, it's all of the soft ethics, etc., that is getting missing in the whole sort of race towards rolling out educational courses in AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anicia. And now, next, we're going to hear from Paul about research.
So just a background, so I'm a university professor, but working also with DFKI, and DFKI is one of these public-private partnerships where essentially I'm an in-kind donation from the university as a contribution to DFKI, right? And DFKI is doing a lot of industry projects. How it relates to education also in research is that in Germany you really have this model that you don't have PhD studies mostly, right? So at DFKI is a research center, and people working for me are junior researcher. All of them are doing a PhD, but very often they don't even register with the university for PhD until they submit, right? So PhD education is really research education. I strongly believe it is the right thing to do. What you do need to actually add to that education as formal courses, what you mentioned, things like ethics, in AI, possibly something like HCI, right? Because they typically I would not care about that. And you essentially need to, right? You need to essentially, this is being deployed and let loose on the populace. It's really important to design them correctly. Yeah. In terms of education for the global, global marketplace, global interaction, I think that actually this sort of research project like PhD is really nice because at least in DFKI, every of those projects is something like a publicly funded project with many partners. Some of them industry. I'm a big fan of this European project, when the student comes somewhere and then there's a guy from some very, very deep German province. I have this people where I was at a university, right, and has to go to a EU meeting with an Italian, a Norwegian, and a Swiss, right? And one of them is a doctor, the other one is, and that really, you see them grow. And these are the people who then in the end are really, you can send them to industry and they can do something, right? They can compete. They still don't really see the world outside Europe. I lived a long time outside Europe, so I understand that we live in a bubble, that not understanding a lot of the world outside is sometimes different. Now, coming to education and research in Gen AI, I think it's really interesting because actually I think that teaching Gen AI in terms of using Gen AI is something that is not as much at a PhD level, but actually I believe it belongs more on a primary school level. Right? Actually, I teach my kids to use that, and that is another thing that is really big because actually Gen AI is one of the things that democratizes AI really, really strongly, right? Because you can do stuff you couldn't do before with much less formal education, but if we're very careful, because I think it's important not just to let people know which website to go to use Gen AI, but to provide an education about what that thing does and what it doesn't. Yes. And it's interesting because kids, at first contact I had with Gen AI was actually through my son who is studying computer science. And, when I search for this problem, I use this stuff, right? Because they're looking and some of those kids really intuitively see it, right? They understand, like they grew up with YouTube, and a lot of them understand YouTube is 80% bullshit. They still watch it because they like it. Right? But then they understand anything you get online is not necessarily true, but that needs to be educated. Once you do that, and you have to start early, those are tools, and I think it's a big opportunity also for the world outside Europe, right? Yes. Because you can do things you couldn't do, right? You can all those things can help you teach. Can you do things you couldn't do before? And I think that's the emphasis. Whereas developing Gen AI, right, diving deeper into this, how do you do it with small computational resources? Those are things that require research and actual collaboration between Europe and countries outside Europe, and I think that is interesting.
Thank you so much, Paul. And last but not least, Yannis is going to tell us also about how Gen AI is affecting research.
I agree that Gen AI, I'm supposed to talk about how to educate researchers. But it may start much earlier. I absolutely agree with Paul on this. And when I saw the assignment, I said, okay, researchers in AI itself, so they develop new algorithms, they develop new techniques, methodologies, or researchers in computing in general that may use AI, or researchers in any field that use AI. I won't talk about the first kind, so the heavy core AI, and some of them are in this room, but I'll talk about doing other research and using Gen AI. First of all, many researchers, at least in computing, system researchers have to code. These are the most successful. You build systems. And we have to be teaching them already from undergraduate level, at least, if not earlier, how to code in the new programming language called prompts. That's the way it is kind of happening a little bit, cautiously and so on. But down the line, much of the coding will be done in the language called prompts. Of course, you have to understand what the correct software that comes out is, so that you have to still learn the basics. But this is important. And in my last course last semester, one of the assignments was do it in prompts, and if I realize that you wrote part of the code, then you're kicked out of class, whereas usually it is if you use help, you're kicked out of class. So, and it was an experience. Currently, you cannot give them a big thing, build it, and then it will do it. You have to break it down in pieces, but it's working. But coming to the let's say, educating a researcher, starting from undergraduate level and masters. I don't know about courses at the PhD level, but anyway, GenAI will play a big role. And I looked at the ACM is the leading society for coming up with a standard undergraduate curriculum. And just a few months ago, CS 2023 came out, 10 years after the previous version, with a EEE, AAAI, and so on. And the knowledge area, artificial intelligence, is much, much bigger compared to the past. And in fact, as this was being developed, AI was going so fast that they were changing it continuously. And now in the description of this knowledge area of artificial intelligence, GenAI is mentioned 18 times in a document that, that says how AI should be taught. GenAI in vision, GenAI in natural language processing, and so on. So this is at the core of what all these committees that formed that talked about the need to develop GenAI. And it's, for me, I mean, there is a huge hype of AI. I think you mentioned it in the previous panel, how things have come and gone, or maybe it was Barry that was mentioning it. And I'm a data guy, so I'll say something about data now, but I'm not biased. I think I'm quite objective. AI without data is useless. Okay, it is if you have a car, whether it's a Yugo or a Lamborghini, it doesn't matter, that you don't put oil in it. The correct kind of oil to run. So curriculum and developing researchers by just teaching them the algorithms and techniques and tricks of AI without teaching them data science is really doing a disservice to the researcher. And because the right type of data will make a difference on whether the AI will give you something. And algorithmic bias and data bias is critical in terms of understanding what the results of an AI algorithm or a technique will give you. And that's an important issue of inclusion. I mean, you mentioned about African values. I would be interested to know what are these African values and how they differ from other values. But certainly, if you have a medical application and you have US data and you say, whenever you have thalassemia, this is the percentages and this is what matters, this is bullshit when you leave the US and come to Greece or any other place in the Mediterranean where it's much, much more prevalent, or I'm not sure about Namibia. So data bias, the techniques around it, algorithmic bias, and everything else is very important with respect to inclusion. And in general, in terms of teaching, all of our teaching in terms of how we do research and what is science is top-down. We teach our students in any field rules, what holds. In electricity, in social sciences, in economics, there are a whole bunch of rules. Now, with data science and AI, we're doing bottom-up research, bottom-up science. And this requires a very completely different way of thinking of how we do research in any of these fields. And I think even at the undergraduate level, when we teach science, we have to teach it in both ways. And I think this will be a fundamental change of what we teach our students. That's my first and very high-level thoughts on what we need to do to teach researchers to do research, and any aspects that have to do with globalization. But let me say one more little comment. Researchers also need to publish. And we need to teach researchers in the era of AI, what does publication mean? Now, in ACM, we came up with policy that if you use Gen AI in your paper, you can only use it to correct it and this and that, and you have to declare it. Not changing the language or spelling, that's, you don't have to declare that. But if any part of your text has been generated by AI of whatever form, you have to declare it. Now, of course, how do you detect it if someone did, if this part is a person's and so on? But there is the dilemma. Let's assume, I don't think currently this is true, but let's assume that at some point a Gen AI system comes up with a discovery and writes the paper about it. Shall we, as scientists, as society, in principle, we should care about this result, if it is novel and new and so on. We shouldn't care about who wrote it. But others say, no, this is a human endeavor, and we have to disallow it or mark it, with a red cross or something like this as different. This is a challenge. These are questions that the scientific community, certainly in the context of ACM, but in general in computing and elsewhere, are being discussed. And of course, we'll say, okay, I don't care who wrote it, I will review it. But then you may say, well, what about the reviewer being an AI that reads it and then generates a review? Okay, but then a human will review the review and say, yeah, this is correct. But what if an AI reviews the review and so on? So I think, and I'll stop with this, even in the scholarly communication endeavor that comes out of our research, there are tremendous challenges, but also exciting opportunities that involve ethical aspects as well, assessing people, or even assessing techniques. How do you do it in this new era? So that's a great interest.
I really want to know something on this, right? So, what I always say when I introduce Gen AI, I say Gen AI is just a glorified calculator. Very glorified, but just a calculator. And also saying that, I would very strongly argue that, within writing a paper, and this has to do with global stuff, that, for example, what you see when you write a paper, people who are not native speaker are always at a disadvantage, right? That's something you see. And if you have a scientific result, and we are very far from Gen AI generating a real scientific results, right? Just about writing, I think you should just let the system write it. And it's like nobody, and it's for me saying you should not be writing a text during Gen AI or should declare it, is like saying if you have not written this by hand, but actually used a computer to typewrite it, you should declare it. It's illegal because you're not really writing. Right? So I do think the same thing I say when you talk about exams, for example, and students using Gen AI to pass them. If a student can use Gen AI to pass my exam, then he did not fail. I failed. I did a wrong exam. And I very much like the thing you did about programming, saying them use Gen AI. That's what you should do. Actually, you should go with them. This is a tool that you will be using in the future. And we should train people to achieve results with the best tools that they will have available. So not prevent them from using the AI, but train them to correctly use Gen AI as soon as possible for everything it can do.
If I may, because I forgot one bullet from my mental notes, and you mentioned it, about helping people with linguistic issues. I was going to say that, and not just language. Some people, they cannot they have all the ideas, but they cannot structure something that makes sense. They cannot come with the right image of a table to give their data, and Gen AI can definitely help. And you talked about glorified calculator. If Ed Feigenbaum and all the other forefathers had not named it AI and had named it, I don't know, advanced statistical modeling or something like this, then much of this hype we wouldn't have, and then it would be a better place.
But I wanted to get research.
Yeah, of course.
Do you want to comment on the inclusivity?
No, I actually want to comment. So the first thing is, yes, I think to achieve inclusion as well it's both in the data, but then it's also, I think, in AI literacy for everyone. And that is essentially just teaching them to make sense out of all of the data that they get and not blindly following it. The example that I gave before about these were school kids, right? Where they were saying, yeah, but now they've got a problem because they feed it in, right? And I know the output is as good as the prompter, right? But they just feed in the question or assignment and it spews out whatever. And for them, it's so good that they can't think of any other way how to do it. And I think that's where the danger is. If you are using it as augmentation tool and cited, because you have to reference all of your sources. Because it also pulls the data from wherever. But if you just use it blindly and say, you're dumping them down. So I think that there should be most definitely some rules around it. And of course, in the assessment methods. I mean, I agree with you that if they can pass it and it's undetected, then it's the examiner that failed. Because this is how you set the questions, that you have to contextualize it, because GenAI will give you a standard sort of answer that it finds and not contextual to where it should be.
I do agree with you in all aspects, but usually whenever we talk about AI, we talk always from the student point of view. We never actually talk from the teacher and the professor point of view. And this is a huge problem that needs actually to be addressed, especially in Egypt. I don't want actually to generalize, but we are having a problem that teachers are really ignorant. Either they don't want, let's say, to learn something new, or they are afraid that the students actually will be much better than them. And that's why actually for me, we have actually to go into not only AI education, but AI in education, meaning how can we provide upskilling for teachers as well as for professors to be able actually to, let's say, improve the skills of putting an assessment. Thus, this is actually something that can't be done just overnight, that professors will be able actually to generate, let's say, some of the assessment. If you will give them to any Gen AI tool, then this Gen AI tool will actually fail. Keeping in mind that there are a lot of proofs that Gen AI or AI tools in general can, let's say, pass the law exams, can pass actually the medical exams. They are a little bit actually different, but one day also Gen AIs will be able actually to, let's say, solve complex problems in this case. I do agree that for now, we need actually to rely on Gen AI for, let's say, tasks that shouldn't be replicated and focus more on the innovative part, on the optimization part, on the complex part as programmer. But again, for me, it's just, let's say, a part where also teachers, they have to get, let's say, trained, okay, in order to introduce that in school, in high and middle schools before actually reaching even actually the university in this case.
You were I think you're also involved in one of the initiatives about doing that.
I agree very much with you that you should always use the best tools available, what you said. But there is also a communication problem, I think, because there is, of course, a fear that the value of the diplomas will disappear. So we have to communicate to our authorities this way of thinking. And of course, the institutions are afraid that they will lose their monopoly on diplomas and the value of diplomas in general. So there is also a communication task to do, I think.
But actually, that is the whole point, right? If you if you have students, you prohibit them using Gen AI, right, and let them generate by hand what Gen AI can generate anyway, then the diploma becomes worthless, right? But if I actually quickly come in and I say educate those students to leverage what Gen AI provides and then generate results with it that are better, that they generate faster, then their diploma retains their value. So I think this is very important. And I wanted to answer something you said. You said, in Egypt, the teachers are ignorant. I think actually that in countries, let's say outside Europe, sometimes the adoption of the technology is actually easier, right? You know, my kid's a teacher at school, so they're sending a newsletter now through a digital app. But this teacher was extremely proud of saying he insists of the children bringing back those newsletters signed by parents on paper, right? And he was very proud of it. And I said, come on, you should educate the kids to live in a world they will encounter, not in the old world that you are longing for.
Just one thing. There is a big debate in the science of research, in the science of education, on whether we should be going for knowledge or for skills. And actually the ACM curriculum now for the first time has the path of the knowledge and the path of the skills. And I don't know if AI and using Gen AI is a skill or part of a knowledge, but if we don't put it as part of that, the universities, whether they're going for the knowledge part or the skills part, or anyway, educational institution, you know, they will fall by the wayside and then they will disappear. And it's progress.
I would like to come to another point. I'm very pleased that thanks to Passant we have an international panel here, because in Europe sometimes we are just confine our research within the European boundaries, which is really bad. So we should always have in mind the international aspects, and they are particularly relevant these days with AI, because AI can help lower the digital divide. That's very important for the entire world. After all, you know, if we move into a society of knowledge, then we need everybody, because just the physical limitations of our brain are impose the fact that everybody should be very well educated, no matter if it's women in the Muslim world or people in the global South. That said, I would like to stress that AIDA, for example, can have members from associate members from all over the world. So a university from Namibia, for example, can join AIDA, and you can offer AIDA courses, or your students can attend AIDA courses. And I would very much welcome this, because we would really aspire to make AIDA an international venture rather than a European one as it is right now. That's point number one. My second point is related to the fact that I lead a project on AI, a European project on AI for natural disaster management, and this is very much an international issue these days. So we started having contacts with countries outside Europe. For example, I'm going to go to Algeria and Oman and United Arab Emirates, because things that happen here in Greece, desertification, for example, they happen also to other countries, or flash floods and so on. So we look very much forward to cooperate with countries outside Europe, either on AI education or climate change, natural disaster management, and I'm pretty sure that other people here that lead other projects, they would welcome cooperation with you outside the European borders.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm just going to highlight something in case someone is missing it in the room, and then we take the next question. So now we have several initiatives. There's the AI curriculum from the ACM. There's the AIDA, which is related to training doctoral students. And there's an initiative as well about training the teachers. So maybe you briefly say something about that.
Since we are a German university in Egypt, we are having a strong cooperation with the German universities. That's the second actually university, which is the German International University, where I'm having actually the role of the president there, is having a kind of a cooperation with universities of applied sciences. And we have a nice initiative, we call it in German KI-Werkstatt. If I will translate it, then actually it will be an AI workshop. And the idea of it is just to have trainers who will come to train the trainers. It's just actually upskilling lecturers who are not from the field of computer science in order actually to learn when and how to use the tools and when not to use the tools, and actually the ethical consideration and, let's say, the consequences and the implications of that. This actually cooperation, we have it with HTW, Hochschule für Technik und Wirtschaft, and it's sponsored actually by the DAAD, which is the German organization in this case. And that's why we are actually really keen to cooperate in international networks, not only with bilateral programs with Germany, but also in a kind of a European network in this case.
So poke them and see how can you contribute to this and use it.
Just a moment. Before we go to these questions, there is a question that was issued before by an online participant, and I will relate it to you for the panel. Okay. Professor Joseph Niznik asked how to control the data source used by AI. Not all data are trustworthy. Someone from the panel would like to... How to control the data source used by AI. Not all data are trustworthy. Data source.
And I think this is now a major problem of the design of AI. So, you know, if you build a bridge, essentially, right, then there are rules for what materials we have to use, right? The materials are qualified by the weight they can take, the heat, whatever. And then you trust the bridge, right? And in AI, there are no rules with respect to the data, which I think is fine when you build academic systems and you do research. But then, of course, once you build them for something, we need those rules. And that is a major issue in the entire AI area, that you don't have those best practice rules. And the same goes for evaluation. So there's one thing, I often talk to doctors and say, I cannot use this AI system because you cannot explain and prove it that it works, right? And I go to him, do you really understand how your medicine works on a low molecular level? They don't. Right? But they use it because they prove it statistically using established protocols. And we don't have these protocols for computer science. Not like we have to exactly understand how the machine learning system does something. You understand how the pill actually works, not always. But you have to have protocols. And that is what we lack and what we need, most definitely.
There is Europe has been moving. I'm just complementing to that question. It's the sensitivity of Europe towards the human rights and fairness and so on, let me say, is a little bit higher than the rest of the world. And the AI regulation that was recently passed shows this, because it is the first time that at the governmental level we try to put some of these rules that Paul talked about, when you have something that affects people's lives, not what you will watch in Netflix next. I mean, this is not a critical thing, but for all critical applications, there are various specifications on what you need to do. You have to say what data it can be used with, what data it was used to train it with, and a whole bunch of other aspects. And you have to declare your data. You have to express when it works and when it doesn't work. So all these things are coming to place. Technology runs much faster usually than society and policy making. But that's the way on critical AI applications to control the source, because most of the data is worthless. So.
Thank you so much. Alex, you had a question?
Thanks. The first question would be, like, do we have more than 2 minutes? Because I would cut the question short then.
We have something like 7, so it's okay.
Okay, that's cool. So hi,
I'm
Alex. I'm with DW Innovation Research and Development Team at German International Broadcaster. So I'm going to ask about media and education and AI in education in general. But first, a bit of context. So you called it a glorified calculator. I like to call ChatGPT a stochastic parrot because it's statistics, it's automation, and it's a shortcut, right? We probably agree on that. And in the media business, we now use it, like for trainees, for instance, for translations, transcriptions, summarizations, and all that. And that's fine. And you should use the tools. I'm a fan of tools, but you should be careful. And I would argue that it is a good exercise to learn a second or a third language and to do a translation manually at some point, and also to summarize yourself at some point and read the entire book. And I've met so many people now. I know this is anecdotal evidence and I haven't conducted a study, but I've met so many people who now tell me, I didn't read the entire paper, I just read the summary, or I didn't read the book, I just, blah, 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 etc. So my question is, because I think it's a valuable thing, how do you motivate students, young people, trainees, etc., to actually do it the old school way, and once you've understood how that works, use the tools, move on to the automation level? Is there a way? Because I'm kind of afraid people are losing a certain skill set.
I would even challenge the question even more and say, do we even need to make people read everything and understand everything, or just summaries are more than enough? One of you wants?
I'll answer, but with a discussion I had with my elder son. You're talking about him, you have to read before you watch YouTube videos, stuff. And he came in a very clever statement. He told me, research, and said, when people invented printing, there was exactly the same type of outcry, saying, but it's terrible because people will not be able to learn everything by heart anymore. That will be really bad for civilization. So I think the tools essentially means that if you have them, then probably being able to translate and summarize is not an essential skill anymore, and you should use the mental capacities to do other things, right? I'm a big fan of actual foreign languages, that are a different thing, but probably it is also going to be the skill that you will not need. There's enough interesting and complex things we could learn.
So Anicia had a comment on that.
So I think the same goes for always people asking, do we still need to teach the students coding, right? Like old school way. And for me it is, we're teaching the fundamentals. We were never even teaching specifics, but fundamentals that you can go and apply everywhere. I think it's important that students, for instance, still need to know, how do you arrive at it? How was it done? What's underlying? They need to understand those fundamentals, and then they can use whatever tool is out there. But I wouldn't start with, the tool first, and then they don't understand anything, and they're moving through the world, and the next tool that comes, they don't understand it either, or superficially. So that's my take on it.
I really need to answer something.
I just want to comment on Paul's, because I do agree fully with Paul. And the problem is we are always trying actually to compare, let's say, the education of today with the education of the last 10 years, which shouldn't be the case. Thus, I'm teaching still computer science, despite actually, let's say, my role as president, and I'm seeing actually the Z generation, which is actually really the generation of TikTok. 90 minutes lecture for them is just a killer. And that's why it has to be done actually really differently. Thus, you cannot expect that every lecturer will be an entertainer. And that's why we lose actually the interest of students actually from the first 10 minutes. Yeah. And that's why I am sure that there are actually skills that are not, as Paul said, that are not needed anymore. If I will get actually, let's say, a good quality in short time, the question is, why the hell should I spend, let's say, days or let's say months actually, let's say, to acquire this skill if it is actually done for free?
The example of summarization and coding is very good because there are two things. ChatGPT is a statistical parrot. It knows the probability distribution of lexical tokens, which means it's really good at summarization, right? Because that's exactly what it is, right? ChatGPT has no clue about coding, right? What it can do is replicate pieces of codes that are very popular, right? So it's useful because you can ask it to provide you a piece of code that you don't know how to do, but there's a big difference. You need to teach them coding because they still have no clue about coding. It provides you useful code snippets that may or may. You don't need to teach summarization because those tools are excellent at summarization because that's exactly what's their core competence. Statistics of text, they're text generators.
Super short comment, and then we take the last question.
No, I actually just wanted to say that one of the things that I started off with when I'm saying that when we have to upskill and reskill we don't need university degrees, but then one of the problems is seeing it with tech startups as well, AI startups as well, is that they go depth first, so in-depth training, right? But what they miss is that we don't have all of the design aspects, all of the other aspects, and they can't pivot, when they have to change their models, etc. So I think that there's definitely a need to make sure that we still have sort of breadth in education.
So we're being stared at. This is going to be our last question.
Yes.
Last question.
We don't have time for more questions because
we can take questions.
Okay. Yes. So thank you so much for being super interactive with us. Please feel free to poke them. They're going to be outside for food. And thank you for attending.
So